Start? Organized. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to D&I Pe Charcha, presented by Novartis, an initiative by India Diversity Forum. I, Melita, welcome you to this D&I Pe Charcha May edition. For businesses to survive in this competitive era, driven by globalization and real-time consumer connections, organizations need to widen their understanding of world cultures and societies. Failing to embrace the benefits of a diverse workforce is a missed opportunity. A culturally diverse workforce can inspire creativity and drive innovation. A diverse talent pool provides cultural sensitivity, insight, and local knowledge, leading to higher quality, targeted connections with the consumer base. While it's proven its a diverse skills base allows an organization to offer a broader and more adaptable range of products and services. Integration across multicultural teams can be difficult in the face of prejudice or negative cultural stereotypes. Hence, India Diversity Forum brings to you this exclusive panel discussion on integrating multicultural workforce, navigating the challenges to capitalize the benefits. To begin this charcha, I would like to welcome our esteemed speakers for the session. Vineet Shukla, Group Lead, TA, D&I and Onboarding from MCure Pharmaceuticals Limited. Anandita Bagchi, Chief General Manager, Corporate Affairs and Communication from Pipeline Infrastructure Limited. Sumita Bhatnagar, Head Corporate HR, VFS Global. And the moderator for this session is Jayant Subramanian, Strategy and Transformation Manager, Procurement, LGBTQI plus ERG Lead India, Novartis. Over to you, Jayant.
Thank you very much, Melita, and a good day to one and all. A hearty welcome to all participants to this edition of the India Diversity Forum's D&I Pe Charcha. My name is Jayant Subramanian. As previously introduced, I am a Digital Strategy and Transformation Manager at Novartis India. And in addition to that, I am also the LGBT plus ERG or Employee Resource Group Lead for Novartis India and lead multiple D&I initiatives in this space. For today, I will be your host and panel discussion moderator. As already mentioned, today's discussion is around how to integrate a multicultural workforce and how to navigate the challenges to capitalize on the benefits of this workforce. And the reason this topic is critical is twofold. On one hand, with both Indian companies and global companies increasing their cross-country footprint, it is very important to keep in mind cultural sensitivities and diversity of people across hierarchies to avoid any complications, faux pas, or errors on our side. At the same time, this is also important from an India perspective, given the level of cultural diversity that we as a country have. It's very often to say that you travel in any direction in India, 100 kilometers, and you will have a completely different culture. And so with that level of diversity across state lines, religion, language, caste, and community, it is necessary to ensure that a close level of team integration can be enabled for organizations and companies to create business impact. So as you can see, we have an eminent set of panelists with wide range of experience in this area with a lot of input. So I'm really looking forward to this discussion. And with that, let's get started with kind of an introductory question to this topic. So I think by now it is quite clear that diversity, equity, and inclusion are business critical topics, and actually having a diverse workforce and having an inclusive work environment does result in a positive business impact. We don't need to debate on whether or not D&I is necessary. It is something that is many discussions and papers have been written about. However, in your opinions, panelists, what could be some challenges that organizations might face while working with a multicultural workforce? Could you share some examples from your previous experience where you faced such challenges when you had to work with people or teams from very different cultural backgrounds? Maybe I'll address this first to Vineet, and then others can also join in. Vineet, I think you're on mute. I'm sorry, just very quickly.
Yeah. So thanks, Jan, for setting the context so well. And as we say that India is the when we discuss about this topic, our country is kind of has to lead the way in terms of the kind of diversity we have. So I'll just want to add a line before answering to your question that there is an adage which is said in Hindi for India is that ki कोस कोस में बोली बदले चार कोस में भाषा. So that's the kind of structure our country has. If I have to talk about my experiences, so since apart from diversity and inclusion, I am also handling talent acquisition. So my experiences mostly come from the work that I do. So as you know that MCure Pharmaceuticals is a multinational company with presence in 70 plus countries. So I have been handling emerging markets hiring from last a year and a half. I'll just share one example where this multicultural aspect in terms of the global context came, where I was discussing with one of the regulatory affairs candidate for Philippines. Okay, so the hiring manager who was the Asia and Latam head for our business development and sales and marketing for emerging markets. So I was discussing with him that normally what happens in India, when we finish all our discussions, we ask for, we tell people that share us the salary documents, and then we will do some working and we'll share the offer to you, and then we will discuss and all that. So I discussed with the head and told that this is what I had a discussion with the candidate, and he said that we have to change the way, otherwise they will get offended. So he said that we have to change the way because for them it is very direct and there is not much of personal touch, because it is even India is a high context culture, but these countries, especially the Southeast Asians and the Asian countries, are much more high context in terms of the people centric or people orientation, more of approach that. So he said, like, go on a Zoom call or a Teams call, and then see her documents over the screen, discuss the entire offer, entire thing over the same call, and try and make it more personal, understand the challenges, understand the situations, and then share your proposal there and get all the details, because they will not be directly telling you. If you share the offer, they may not directly come and tell you ki, this is what I'm not liking, because for them, their culture, the way they operate, it doesn't suits their way of approaching, and they may get offended, but they may not express it. Okay, so then I had to do that and to make it more personal, discuss the challenges, understand, and then tell that this is what we can do, this is what we cannot do. So that is one very relevant example that I could share. And the recent one was we were again hiring for our API division business, and I was evaluating a candidate for fairly senior level. Okay, so what happened that we were interviewing, and when we asked him that why did he made X company switch to Y company, switch to Z company, his reasons were like, I was traveling a lot, and then I suddenly felt that I'm actually getting burned. So in India, we all are, the way we work, no one will come and say that I'm getting burnt. He said, I was traveling across, my work involved traveling, and I was getting burned. Then I thought, let me take some kind of break. And he took a break for a couple of years, and then he went on for some kind of tour or trip, some voyage, and then he joined some other company. And when we were interacting that what kind of opportunity you are looking, so he said that I don't want travel, I don't want to travel, and I want to create a work-life balance where I have my girlfriend is working in some organization virtually, and she's able to manage everything. So why we have to travel? And then we said that, but for a client, if it's a business BD role, you have to at least go and meet the person. So he said, if we are starting the conversation, then we can go and meet. But after that, for all follow-up discussion, it is waste of time. He said that for 2 hours I will be in airport, 2 hours I will be on road, 2 hours I will be in flight, and then I will attend 1 hour meeting. So I'm just giving these examples to set the context that how various different cultures, and this guy was from a European country. So this guy was from a European country. So two examples to show very clearly that how our mindset, our thought process are a little different from how they, and now you have to manage those sensitivities. Now you have to adapt, understand there. And if I see in terms of inclusivity angle, if I bring inclusivity angle to both of these examples, we may feel that in India we don't do like this. But at the same time, if we try and understand their culture, their way of approach, they are not wrong. Whatever they are saying, they are no way wrong. But for an Indian manager or an Indian person to say, "अरे 2 साल का उसने break ले लिया, burn हो रहा था." So this is how we will approach. How can someone just make a reason कि मैं burn हो रहा था and I took a break of 2 years? So this will become a big topic of discussion in a forum or in a meeting if some Indian comes and says this. So these are some examples that I first hand do through my work in last couple of years, which I said the two different examples. So one for an Eastern set of a high context culture, more of people oriented, and then a very apt example for how the Europeans are little casual. And the problem when we highlight these examples is that the problem with talking on a multicultural context is people start thinking that we are having a stereotype. So these are one-off examples, but if we say in terms of the contextual terms, then they are good examples. But if we start connecting it with the entire region or entire country or start creating biases around it, then it's a stereotype. It's a very thin line. So when we take this topic and talk on that, it's a very thin line where you have to also understand the sensitivity, but not get into a mode of a bias. Unconscious, need not get into a mode of unconscious bias or a kind of stereotyping, which might affect your further future conversations with any of your other country counterparts.
Yeah, that makes sense. Exactly the point around creating a bias, right? Because now it shouldn't happen that the expectation from someone from a particular region is that this is what they will expect by default, right? So that is always a risk in this case, in that these biases may get created even without knowing that. Any other examples about challenges that you might have experienced, Sumita and Anandita, would you like to share?
Yeah. So Jayant, I think the biggest challenge which we face is how to ensure a sense of seamlessness, sense of a common experience, despite employees or let's say the various stakeholders belonging to different cultures, different countries, different time zones, and carrying different kind of beliefs about a particular thing. For example, I can share a very simple example is a sense of dress. In some cultures, full dress might look very, very awkward, while it is encouraged in some other cultures. While a short dress might look very awkward in some, but it is considered very natural or normal in others. Or consuming alcohol again during working hours is pretty normal in some, while it is not in others. And that's where where we need to arrive at a common value system rather than the common way of doing things, but a common way of believing. So that when we interact or engage with each other, we work on a level of values rather than in terms of judging somebody or speaking to or taking calls in terms of the behavior. And that's where in VFS where we come in, because we are present in almost 134 plus countries. We have around 110 nationalities working with us. And Indians are barely 20 to 25% of the total population. 75% is all expats of different countries, and everybody has their own beliefs. So what we try to do is work out from a positioning of a common value, while respecting, the way the person speaks or eats or, dresses, which everybody, each of us understands that this is expected, and this one should appreciate. And that's the challenge also, how do we communicate so that we are inclusive of all these differences while without hurting anybody's sentiments or feelings while we are communicating any particular thing. So these are some of the challenges which we have to look at in terms of integrating from an organization level, while still maintaining that kind of a distinction in terms of a country, religion, or a cultural level. I hope
Absolutely.
that this answers.
No, that was really helpful, Sumita. Thanks for that. And yes, you're right. That I think it is about these variances, and similar to what Vineet mentioned about that fine line, holding the balance is, I think, where the challenge lies. And this kind of actually feeds into my next question, which which is a bit of a, like, what do I say, like a bit of a challenge that a lot of companies and a lot of people managers might also face, especially as their span increases, right? Because within India as well, I've spoken about our diversity also, and so a lot of times what ends up happening is that given that we have associates and employees from so many different parts of India working together in the same location or in teams, in virtual teams, it might also end up being a situation where you have groups of people from similar cultural backgrounds who kind of get together, and this could potentially also lead to some kind of circles of exclusion. So when this happens on an informal setting, it may not be as serious, but then there are cases where, for example, people who might be from the same state or who might speak the same language, for example, they might start getting together, and that might also start affecting the way that business decisions are made, or it might also impact favoritism. And I'm pretty sure that everyone who is on this call might have experienced to some extent in their professional life this in the past. So what might be some actions that could be taken within your companies and within your teams to ensure that these kind of circles of exclusion may not get created, that that might impact the way that business decisions are made?
So shall I respond to this first? Yeah.
Sure. Maybe Anindita, you can come in, because I think you haven't spoken yet.
Okay, no, not at all.
Anyone, it's open for all.
Okay, Sumita, you want to start, and I'll.
No, that's okay. I'll follow you on it. Yeah.
Okay, so for diversity and inclusion, as a concept, I think just a small a statement that resonates with me. Actually, two aspects of D&I that resonate very well, very deeply with me is one. I come from a very, very diverse cultural background in terms of family. So I have within India, outside India, different religion, different castes. So for us, when we were growing up, it's been there in-house, we've seen it. So for us, that is the only thing that exists. We never see anything else outside, that, okay, you belong to a different thing. For us, it's very normal. And second aspect, which I was reading some time back, and there was a statement somebody had, I had come across while I was reading the article, was that diversity is when you're invited to a party, and inclusion is when you're actually asked to dance and celebrate the main idea of the get together, right? So when we talk about D&I, and especially at PIL at this point in time, there are few initiatives that we take wherein we try to avoid the situation of having those exclusive groups, because we are humans at the end of the day, and it's our nature, right? We find it's just our comfort level that we feel when we meet somebody from the same region or the same language if we are speaking. So that, it's just human. So what we initially do, for example, is if I take from the hiring aspect, during the hiring aspect, when we give the CV to the hiring manager, when our HR gives it to the hiring manager, we ensure that we mask the gender as well as the region. So that is first step that we tell the hiring manager that this is anyways of no significance to you. It's not going to, it shouldn't be clouding your opinion or your judgment about the candidate, and it has to be based totally on the skill set that the person is bringing onto the table. So that is where we start.
Then once we get the employee on board, we initiate the process of a buddy program. So we have this entire plan, which is step by step, and hence I started all the way from hiring. So buddy program, what it does is it helps all the new joinees. We give them buddies, the people who have already worked with us. And when they handhold them in the initial 40 to 45 days within the organization, it just helps those new joinees to settle down comfortably, right? These things and most of these biases that come in might just be in our head. It's how we perceive the other person or the person sitting across the table. So that if there's a doubt or if there's any biasness in our head, the buddy is able to help us. The third step, as and when they become old and they get used to the system, we then introduce them to the mentor and mentee program. So when we say the mentor and the mentee program, it is a very apart from being inclusive, it is very in terms of it's a voluntary initiative at PIL. So what we do is mentors are identified on a yearly basis, and those are shared with the entire organization. So the employees are free to choose their mentors with whom they feel comfortable, right? But again, we will obviously at the end, we do see it so that again, the element of biasness doesn't creep in over a period of time. Just because I have known the employee, so the HR is there in the first initial meetings to see if that's a good fit. Now from the mentor-mentee, on a regular basis, there are a lot of policies which I feel should always be inclusive. For example, at PIL, our child adoption leave is extended equally to both male and female. We don't differentiate there. Most or 99% of our policies are applicable in the same manner to all the employees, irrespective of their designations. We do not differentiate there. And lastly, also is that there are a lot of talks about engagement, right? How do you manage? That is another challenge, just, probably a point from your first question that you had asked, Jayant, that is another challenge. How do you engage? One activity might be engaging to a certain set of people. The same might not be engaging to the other set, right? So whenever we are undertaking the engagement activities or our annual engagement calendar, we ensure that we cover all the aspects in terms of religion, region, countries. For me, it is more India because we are based out of India mostly, but our parent company is a Canadian-based company. Hence, that's the other aspect that we do. So in India, when we are developing our engagement calendar, we ensure that it's inclusive. It covers all aspects of D&I. And also, for example, if there's an event wherein there's a competition, in our rules and regulations of the competitions, we always ensure that it's a mix of in terms of gender. Because what happens is women will be like, we'll all be together. Men tend to, so then that gets a little, the balance is not maintained. So in order to do that, we encourage people, we give them extra points saying that if it's a diverse, it's a mix of a team, you definitely score points. So these are certain things that we do. And like I said yesterday also, that while we were discussing, that at PIL, D&I is a part of the culture. We never make it, none of us given an extra or go out of our way to be a part of it. For us, it's a part of the culture and it's a part of our daily routine. So I hope I've answered the
that's
question.
those inputs are actually very very insightful, Anita. Thanks a lot for sharing. I think there's a lot of learnings that you could take. I mean, anyone could take and apply within their teams. Not only, I mean, even if you're not in say HR or D&I, but even within teams on how to run certain activities. That's quite helpful. So thanks a lot for that. Sumita, you would like to go ahead as well?
Yeah, thank you, Jayant. And I think I agree with Anandita. Because one aspect is the employee life cycle, so at various touch points, what are the various activities, how do we manage those processes is extremely critical, that they are managed in the right manner and giving the right signals. So another aspect which we also do, which we also look at, is in terms of the setting up of both formal as well as informal boundaries and the rules. Some of the rules are formally written down, that these are the do's and don'ts. And one of the reasons is because we operate out of so many countries that we need to formalize certain processes. And what we do is one area is a cultural sensitization. So let's say somebody is moving outside India to another country or another location, the person is inducted into the culture of that country or of that area, so that the person is aware about the formal do's and don'ts. And obviously, there are some unwritten rules and unwritten guidelines are also there, so to avoid any of these, let's say, red flags or pitfalls where the person can fall into by not being aware about. Second thing which we do very formally is through our systems. So we have few systems. Let's say one is the people capability maturity model, which we have implemented, where all our work processes and policies, they define very clearly what needs to be done, which are standardized across the globe. So, for example, let's say a very simple process like a recruitment or an interviewing process. We try to give a similar experience to a person, whether the person is getting interviewed in, let's say, Canada, or a person is getting interviewed in Australia. So similar kind of a process is there to give a similar experience, which is fair, which is objective, and which is inclusive. Likewise, we have also digitized all our employee lifecycle touch points, because by virtue of the spread which we have geographically, it is not physically possible to engage with each of the persons. So all our processes are digitized, and they become very, and so the employees are very clear that this is the only way we can go ahead and let's say engage either with the employees or the stakeholders or the outsiders, so that a very standard process or a way of engagement emerges, which includes inclusiveness and taking sense of being sensitive about the various diversity and situations and scenarios. So some of these areas, besides what Anandita has mentioned, we also get into, where we hardcode these into our processes and systems to ensure that the right outcomes are given, and no actions which are not sensitive to diversity and inclusion take place.
Sure, thanks a lot for that, Sumitabh. I think, yes, the digital aspect is also something that is important, especially now in this stage where we have kind of a hybrid workforce, people who are some people who are working from home, some people who are working in the office. So I think that is something that is also important to maintain, because it also builds that culture of not only the processes, but also it builds that overall corporate culture in a more consistent manner, especially in the last couple of years. You have so many people who've joined in companies fully virtually. Vineet, do you have any points that you'd like to add on this question around the groups in the company?
Yeah, so basically, I just wanted to add a point on the previous question that we were taking in terms of the homogeneity, language, and the exclusion part that we were discussing. So MCure is a basically Pune-based organization, and trust me, I have not experienced that kind of exclusion or in general also. So I would say that all our previous 3 CHROs, none of them knew Marathi. The plant that the admin building that I'm sitting, the plant doesn't know Marathi. I don't know Marathi. My predecessor was not knowing Marathi. So the exclusion that gets created by a local native culture, and I don't see anyone any problems in terms of, so that in terms of that area, MCure is very inclusive, and we don't have that kind of exclusion environment. That at the same time, what we do when we hire, so since Sumitabh and Ananta have already shared a lot of examples in terms of the entire employee life cycle, I'll just keep it short in terms of just sharing one example, that in our campus hiring process, when we decide on the colleges that we are planning to go, we try to make sure that we don't hire all the requirements from one particular college. So we try to get someone from East Indian College or someone from the West, so to bring the multicultural Indian multicultural diversity within the entire batch that we take, and also to bring in the gender as diversity also. So recently we have hired for our IT folks 10 people, and we picked the colleges across West India, North India, and so that is one thing where we are also trying to inculcate the same kind of ideology and the philosophy to bring in more diversity in terms of multicultural, because our organizational culture also is supporting it. So that becomes easy for us. So normally the D&I journey is a chicken and egg story. whether diversity has to be focused first or the inclusion has to be focused first. Because if you focus on diversity and inclusion is not there, then there's a challenge. And if you focus on inclusion and not able to bring in the diversity further, then the whole culture may get lost down the line. So it's a chicken and egg problem. And
Yep.
hence I thought I'll give this example where inclusion is there, but still we are trying to continue the journey and bring in more multicultural diversity to leverage the atmosphere that we already have.
Right. No, that's really great to know, Vineet, and I think that's it's kind of a challenge for a lot of companies because you know, and in this case, I think in your case, it's really great that that's not the case at MQ, but still you are building the environment of diverse talent coming into the company as well to augment with the inclusive environment that's there. So that's good to know. In fact, in addition to that. So I think one aspect when we're talking about diversity and inclusion is on the talent side, but I think communications is also something that is quite important because it pretty much represents the voice of the company, both inside as well as outside. And I know that Anandita, you're working in the corporate affairs and comms team. So what are some of the practices and measures that you have incorporated or plan to incorporate to ensure that any messaging from the company, both in as well as out, takes into account the diverse sensitivities of your audience?
Jayant, I'll keep this short because with respect to communication, right, it's always said when we study communication or when we are giving trainings to people, we always focus on one key thing, right? An effective communication is something that the audience understands, right? There has to be a takeaway. They should understand either they take away what I want them to tell, and they have to understand it in the way that they get it. They need to take the key message out. And that's the only time that I say that a communication is effective. If my audience is not convinced, or my audience and I as a trainer or as a speaker are not on the same page, then that is not an effective communication, right? So even when it comes to communicating with a diverse workforce, there are 2 or 3 simple things that we always keep in mind. I have always in my last 12 years, and even at PIL, we always do that. First is that the communication has to be crisp. And there is no one format that fits all. Now, if you're doing a technical bulletin, if you're doing like an article in a magazine, if it's a newsletter, all of them have a certain do's and don'ts that we all are very conscious of. But the key of all these platforms or all the mediums of communication stays that one, it has to be crisp and it has to be simple, right? Something that my audience can understand very clearly and the message is conveyed. The second aspect that we always, now taking the crisp and simpleness, taking it to the next step, the key policies, like Sumita was saying, there are a lot of these policies that they always ensure that are communicated to the people. The cross-cultural training that they do if somebody is traveling abroad or somebody is coming from abroad to India. Now, this training is what one is that we keep doing, regular trainings in terms of communication as well as specific to a particular country based on where the person is traveling. Another thing is that we follow a lot of translations. If it's for example, if it's a posh policy, right? And like I said, we are in India, based out of India. Now, with our HO in Mumbai, and we are spread across 10 other states, 3 other states, and all the way from Andhra, Hyderabad, Gujarat, all these are the states that we cover. Now, I cannot expect, it's not, I shouldn't be assuming that a person in Andhra understands Hindi or English, right? It is my duty as a communication person to ensure that the message is conveyed. If he or she is comfortable in the regional language, it is my responsibility to ensure that it is available to the person. So all the key policies, when we talk about POSH or your ABC, your ethics policies, as well as any regional communication that is specific to them, we ensure that we translate. That's something that goes very well with our audience, and our employees accept it, wholeheartedly. Another aspect that we see is, one should always be careful of using slangs and jargons. And when I say slangs and jargons, not only when in writing, even when you're speaking. So this was from an earlier organization where we had a group of people visiting us from Bangladesh. And I'm sure all of us have, at some point in time, whether personal or professional, we've always given a thumbs up to people, right? Saying, well done, it's good. So apparently we were taught before they came that thumbs up in Bangladesh is offensive. So all of us had to make that conscious effort on that day to not do it. Probably we wouldn't do under normal circumstances, but it's like, when you're told not to do something, you tend to. So we were very conscious on that day, right? That we are not supposed to do. So these are small things which I wouldn't be aware if those people weren't coming and we wouldn't have been given that particular training. So these aspects, and the last, which I have learned over the last few years while I was working in PIL, the significance of closing the loop of a discussion. That is something that we ardently believe at PIL. And we always ensure that if there is a discussion that has been initiated with an employee or a communication that has gone out, it's always a two-way communication. So if I am communicating something to my audience, I should be willing to listen to them as well. So when you listen to people from different culture, you get different perspectives. It not only helps you understand your audience, but if by chance you've committed an error, by subconsciously, you will definitely be conscious the next time. And your audience is convinced that you are listening, and you get back to them saying that this is what you had shared. This is what has been done by the organization. And this is the best that we could have done. We are probably not giving you exactly what you wanted, but this is the best that we as an organization could have provided to you. So these are the few steps that we are very conscious when we are communicating to our audience.
Sure. No, that's really helpful, and I really like the last point that you mentioned, which is around the part around going back and saying, okay, this is what we've learned, right? Because which is probably not only in this case, but even in general, I think it's a great point to actually go back and say, hey, we didn't do this right, but then we have learned. At least, even if it's to internal associates, it's still something that communicates. It gives that empathy and trust factor with employees. Exactly. To continue to trust the company as well, so and the leaders.
We start all our events and meetings from the last meeting's action items.
Yep.
So absolutely. We ensure that we do that, whether it's a town hall or a weekly meeting or a monthly meeting. So that's a habit that we've inculcated amongst our employees to do it.
Yep.
And I think we've reaped the benefits as well.
Sure. Any other inputs from Vineet, Sumita around this side, around the communication side? Yes, please.
Since Nandita is heading corporate communications, she was the right person, and you picked up and she has covered most of the things. I have just one example, because not handling corporate communications or even policy making, but we conducted a diversity and inclusion week during the 8th to 15th March, and we had one contest, so which was share a story, where employees were supposed to share stories of inspiration from maybe their mother, their wife, or women they have who have inspired them. So some of the stories came in Marathi, and those stories were amazing, but we wanted that the message gets communicated all across to everyone, and everyone understands the impact and the story, because that was the entire objective of running that contest. So what we did, that we did the original story along with the picture of the employee, and then we did the translation of that, and that we communicated and broadcasted to the entire organization. So it was to capture the essence and the sensitivity of the employee who has sent it in their native language, but at the same time everyone understands that. So that was a very small thing that we did, and we didn't stop. There was discussion, it is in Marathi, should we send it to all, because people will not be able to, but the story was very impactful. So we decided to tweak this way and broadcasted it to the entire organization.
Sure, that's really good. And in fact, I think that's an important thing for a lot of people to keep in mind, because especially in corporate setups, a lot of times we tend to assume that English is kind of the language that everyone is comfortable with, and it is like a, what do you call it, like a link language that you could say, right? However, I think it really depends on the audience, right? So you have to keep in mind that, we might have a lot of people who would be a lot more comfortable in regional languages. So I think translation is going to be something that will be coming up as we have more diverse sets of employees coming out and working in different companies. That's a great point, an example that you raised, Vineet. I'm going to move forward because I know that we have a couple of more questions, and we also have questions coming in from our listeners. So maybe I'll address this, Sumita, to you. So what are some of the biggest challenges that you see that Indian associates and Indian employees face when working with global teams and global stakeholders, and how can you help with how can companies help with teams to better assimilate, at least Indian employees to better assimilate with people from different cultures?
Yeah. So it's a very interesting question, Jayant, and in fact we experience this regularly because we have programs where quite a lot of Indians, they get posted outside to different countries, and it is not only to, let's say, UK or US, but countries like Russia, South American countries like Argentina, Brazil. So we have people going across a number of countries and working out from there. And see, if you want me to answer very simplistically, I would say we try to expand their horizons first. So the more narrow my vision, or the more narrow my understanding or a perception about a particular issue, the more judgmental I'll become, and the chances or probability of me getting into issues in that culture will be more. So we try to from a softer perspective, do a sensitization, make them aware, and especially the specific cultural and other nuances which are there for that particular country. We try to make them aware about. And yes, mentoring becomes a key part because already the Indians who are already working in that location support the new person in terms of understanding the nuances, the way the person should behave, the do's and don'ts, so that the low-hanging fruits are taken care of. Second thing, obviously, is again from the hard coding part is the processes and the systems, which also help us in terms of increasing the understanding. So the gaps in terms of when we interact or engage with the local population there, there's not too much of issues in terms of any insensitivity. And I can share with you, there have been instances in the past where we had these issues which got captured, and then proactively and preemptively as an organization, we took calls in terms of immediately hiring maybe trainers or coaches or mentors at the local level, or even at a regional or a country level to support these colleagues and bring them to a level so that these kind of challenges are not faced again. And secondly, let's say, for example, I can give you a very simple example, and again, I'll come back to India. And since POSH was discussed earlier by Anandita, so let me touch upon that only. So usually we consider that POSH is only in the workplace as of now. But with the hybrid model coming in, our POSH also includes sensitivity or sensitization in terms of behaviors which happen online. So both the manager or the team members or the colleagues might be working from different locations, which might not be even their home or even their workplace. But certain set of behaviors can still be offensive or can be considered offensive. So the sensitization which we start is from that level. So like this, we have both formal and informal structures and processes in place to ensure that whether the person is working within India or moving outside to other countries, they are aware about and sensitive and mindful to the kind of cultural requirements of those particular places where they're going into.
Thanks a lot, Sumita. And you also brought in the valuable point around, especially with people working in different locations, how things are changing, right? That itself is kind of a cultural change for a company and also for an associate because their work culture is changing. So it's important to keep that change also in mind between two different groups. And Anandita, Vineet, so have you also experienced or have you seen any differences between the ways that you might have might have engaged with employees in this topic between before COVID and now with respect to trying to remove biases or trying to immerse as people and employees into different and diverse cultures between how things were done before and now?
I think I completely agree with what Smita said, and we had done a similar thing so I joined PIL virtually. And as in when we progressed and COVID cases started coming down, we started opening up the offices. And like Sumita said, we did a similar activity of sensitizing with respect to, POSH or the behaviors. Probably we didn't call it from the POSH perspective, but we said that what are the certain do's and don'ts when you are virtually you're attending team meetings or Zoom meetings, what are the do's and don'ts, so that people are sensitive. Also, another aspect that we have taken up right now here is with respect to we have adopted something called the theater workshops. So especially for these very sensitive topics, when we talk about whether it's posh, or we're talking about ethical behavior, or we're talking about substance consumption within, against it, like abuse, alcohol abuse or substance abuse at workplaces. I think this is something that we have explored at PIL, and trust me when I, believe me when I say it, that the impact that these trainings have as compared to a classroom training on topics such as these is just unimaginable. We had not anticipated the amount of the acceptance that we received and the feedback that we've received from our employees on it. And we are in the process of conducting something on the, sensitizing our employees across these regions that I had mentioned, like Andhra, Gujarat, Bombay head office, Delhi branch office. So we are trying to conduct these theater workshops on a topic of alcohol abuse now, just to spread awareness. Like, these are the regular campaigns that we do every year for our employees. So we are again adopting theater workshops. So when we were briefing the agency who does it, right, the only key point aspect that we told them was that we have given them the language preferences. They said we might take a little more time, and we were like, that's absolutely fine with us, as long as the message is being shared in the language that my audience is willing to accept it. So these are the things before and after. But I think when it comes to sensitizing or being sensitive or being empathetic, right, it really doesn't change whether it was pre or post COVID. You still have to be sensitive to people's perspective, their opinions, respect them, treat them equally, whether it was before COVID or post COVID. Rather, the only thing probably that has changed from my end is that the element of empathy, right? We listening to our colleagues, our peers, managers listening to their team members has now gone one notch up. So I think that is something, and I hope that it continues, because that has helped organizations develop.
Thanks for that, Anandita. Vineet, would you like to mention something?
So
Yes.
I completely agree with Anandita in terms of the cultural sensitivity and the inclusion part. Nothing changes between pre or post COVID, and of course the empathy angle and understanding that work-life integration is more important now rather than work-life balance, because people are working from home and there are no time boundaries. So managers understanding that, bringing that empathy and sensitivity can add a lot of value to how to work. The example that I wanted to share was one of my previous organizations. We had the President's Award where the Indian performers who were very annual best performers, they were selected for receiving awards in a different country. It's a regional or the global award where one of the locations would be decided and they have to go. So before that, I drove that for 2 years in the organizations. We used to, we had a trainer, very well-known trainer, Ms. Renu Mattu. She's a cultural sensitivity trainer, well-known in the industry. So we conducted training programs for all the people and also their family members, because these people are supposed to go along with their family members to receive the awards. We conducted workshops which included not only the cultural sensitivity in terms of communication, gestures, but also in terms of dining manners and all, how to use cutlery, so everything. So it was a complete one-day workshop that we used to do just a day before they used to fly for their destination, which was decided for that particular year. So I was also part of that workshop and was fortunate to learn a lot of things. Of course, I didn't went to receive those awards, which was for sales, but I was fortunate to attend those trainings.
Sure. No, I think that's really good, because a lot of times it's very difficult for everyone to be, aware. I think this kind of an approach, both what you mentioned, Anita and Vineet, I think it's really great that companies are actively working in building awareness on different cultures and how to navigate them. So that's really great to see that this is still continuing even through the last 2 years, and hopefully it will increase as we go forward. So with that, these are pretty much the end of the questions I have. However, I know that we have received quite a few very interesting questions from those who are watching. So maybe I'll very quickly open this out for anyone to pick up. We've got 4 questions at this point. So, I mean, anyone can pick up any of these questions. The first one is, how can companies design a unified workplace policy that allows a varied group of people to work together efficiently?
Should I try to attempt that, Jayant?
Sure. Yep.
Yeah. So I think it has to be a balance. Let me put it that way, because what happens is there's some things if you want to address, and if there's too much of unification, then the diversity loses in that. And if there's too much of diversification, then somewhere the common purpose gets lost. So there have to be some things which should be common, which are the core values and the core beliefs of the organization. While there should be some policies which should be local or regional, which support, which makes the processes more efficient, because they are more attuned to the local realities. So I can give you an example. For example, in BFS, whenever we decide on any policies, which are global policies, so we have 8 regions and we have 8 regional HR heads spread across the globe. So and plus their one downs are there who are looking at, let's say, a number of countries. So we share all these details with them, all the background, and take everybody's inputs. And then finally we nail the policy together, so that all the local essence is also captured, while the global values or the direction which we need to drive also happens. So that's and I think that's the best way, because any local let's say pitfalls or any local requirements are also captured in the policy, so that later on it doesn't create an issue either in terms of employee grievances or any legalities or any non-compliances or regulatory issues in the respective countries. So that's the only way I think we can manage, by having a balance between both region and global.
Yep, thanks, Sumita. I think we've mentioned this before, right? This whole point around balance is critical. And I think the other aspect is also the point around learning. So not to, if there's a policy, then it doesn't get kind of set in stone. It never changes for, say, the next 5 or 10 years, but rather you see how it works. And then that, based on feedback from those who are in that, I think that's also a very important point that we covered in today's discussion. So thanks a lot for that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the next couple of questions, because they are kind of kind of related, and I'll put this out here. So how can one call out workplace culture that may have the right intention from an inclusion perspective, but may all actually end up doing more harm than good? And similar to that, how can potentially companies address misunderstandings that may slow down the decision-making process? So whether something, whether taking into account the cultural aspect, or in some cases, misunderstandings about culture that may slow down the decision process, but also the other way around, right? You might be doing something for good, but it might do more harm than good. So what can be done in these two situations?
So I would like to take that, Jen. The most important factor related to both of these questions are 2. One is to find a common thread, because the diversity is there. You have to find a common thread, which, as Sumitabh in his first answer told, is values. So values of the organization is a common thread when you're trying to create an inclusive environment. Values, or anything which is common and more intrinsic, is values of the organization. That can be a fulcrum through which you can try doing this inclusion, if in case it's going wrong or some misunderstanding. Second aspect is communication. So if we are doing good and we're not able to communicate and contextualize in the right manner, then the things will not fall in place. So if I have certain benefits around diversity, but if all there in policies and we have not well communicated, then probably the impact will not be able to leverage that. So similarly, these are the 2 points that I wanted to mention. Proper communication, contextual communication, 1, and the second one is to find a common thread, which in my opinion would be company values.
No, that's good. Good to know. I think that common factor is always important, right? Because that acts as your anchor towards any activity that you do further. So that's really good. Anandita, you want to comment? Yes,
Yeah.
sorry.
I just want to rather reiterate what I had said earlier as well as an answer to this question. When it comes to, like you said, and Vineet, Sumitha, everyone, all of us have agreed that, that one common factor is very important, right? That's the push, the pull, everything. That's the core, that's the foundation. But, at the end, again, here comes in is first, there's no rule book, right? There's no right, there's no wrong. Something that has worked for me is not necessary that probably Vineet adopts it. It might not, it may not work, right? So but that doesn't make it that, that particular initiative or that action wrong. It's just that the aspect, it just didn't work because it was a different setup. So number one, there's no rule book. There is going to be, if you're setting up the entire process, right? And when it comes to D&I, it's no one-time activity. The point is you get onto the train. But the thing with D&I is it's a never-ending process. It will keep evolving. Now, initially, we were all talking about D&I. Now, in the recent times with COVID coming in the last 6 to 8 months, if you see, now the D&I is no more called D&I. It's always DEI, right? Yeah. It's diversity, equality, and inclusion, right? So these are the concepts that are going to keep evolving. So it is that what works for us is what we need to keep, we need to keep tracking it. We need to keep understanding our audience because our audience is also going to evolve. It's going to change. What was working for a generation 10 years back is not going to work today. Today, most of the millennials or today the youth that works for organizations, if you see, salary is important for them, but that's not the key. They actually try to understand the culture of the organization, and there's a in the professional field, there's a saying that, a particular employee, if he or she is getting used to or is adjusting to the values, if they match, right? Or if they don't match, for example, if they don't match, the person will not last for more than 3 months in the organization. And if the person has lasted, so either it has matched, so that, or it, the person has adopted the value system. Now, if it's a good value system, it is beneficial, but if it's a bad one, then it affects you, right? So these are the aspects. So there's no rule book. We all need to try different methods, different activities. The point here is to get onto the journey of D&I. Start somewhere. Even if it is a small initiative, a small start, but let's start it because it's a long journey and all of us are in that journey. None of us in India at least haven't achieved, forget even abroad. India, we ourselves have not achieved the attained that none of us here, 3 of us sitting here, even including you, 4 of us cannot make the statement saying that, I am absolutely a diverse, inclusive culture. No, we can't. We are all working towards it. We are learning, we're learning from each other, we are reading. So I think that's a journey that all of us need to traverse in our own way.
Exactly. And I think that's it shouldn't be that just because it's a big challenge that a company says, oh, I don't really want to go on this, right? So it's a step at a time. And I'm going to very quickly go to the last question, which is that a diverse team will see more biases. It could also lead to more discrimination and harassment. How can people managers or team managers create an equal sense of belonging for all members without disturbing the business outcomes? I think this is very relevant, especially for anyone who's managing a larger team or even a medium-sized team. So any points, maybe very quick statements that would help?
Yeah, so Jayant, I think my perspective is, it's more than the action, it is the intent which matters. So because I might be, walking through the top, but if my intents don't match the behavior I'm trying to display, and it gets captured or caught very quickly. So I think the intent of being inclusive, intent of being sensitive to diversity, and my own attitude and approach is very, very critical, and that's what is recommended for a manager. So if the intent is correct and if there's an error in the behavior, still it gets accepted and gets forgiven. But if the intent, if the person realizes the intent itself is not right, then it can become a bit of a challenge. So that's a bit too bit from my side.
Sure. Thanks, Sumita.
Sure.
Great. I know that we are on the clock right now. Melita, would you like to share any words from your side? Any inputs?
Well, thank you. Nothing from my. I think you all have done a really good job by sharing your inputs and giving us a very good insight of all the entire topic. So, if there's anything else for anyone to say, or else I'll just do the closing remarks.
Nothing else from my side except a huge round of thanks to Anandita, Vineet, and Sumita for being a part of the session and sharing all of your inputs. It is definitely a learning experience, which I will personally also be taking. I hope it is also helpful to everyone else who has tuned in. And also a great round of thanks to India Diversity Forum for providing us this forum for all of us to interact and learn from each other and always get better in the areas of DEI in India. So many thanks for that as well.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jen.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Jan.
Jen. Thank you, Melita. Thank you, Sumita. Thank you,
Yes.
Nandita.
Great interacting.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
So,
Yes.
So, wow, that was indeed an insightful session. Having a national and international perspective on culture is indeed the need of the hour. I'm confident that the D&I leaders, as well as the students who joined us today, have multiple takeaways from this charcha. This session will help various organizations wanting to improve their D&I quotient and become an equal opportunity employer, especially in a culturally diverse country like India. On behalf of Team IDF, I would like to thank our speakers for their great insights and thought-provoking discussion. I would also like to thank our audience for keeping the session interactive and spending time out of their busy schedules to be here with us. We will be back next month with yet another D&I Pe Charcha, exploring the various nuances of D&I in the Indian context. Meanwhile, to know more about IDF and our various engagements and initiatives, head over to the IDF website www.indiadiversityforum.org. We'll be back with DNA experts, industry leaders, and more. Until then, thank you and keep safe.